Hello everyone, welcome to the economics class with me Biraj Chetri, PGT Economics, Kendriya Vidyalaya, Barkuhi. Today we will be discussing about consumers equilibrium, ordinal utility approach, which is in microeconomics class 11 CBSE. Okay. As you all know, we have already discussed about the concept of budget line and indifference curve, and today we are going to discuss about how consumer equilibrium is determined in the ordinal utility approach. Okay. This question is a bit common question. Using the ordinal utility approach, explain how the consumer's equilibrium will be obtained for two commodity case. So how will we solve this question? First of all, in this question, what we need to do is we have to define the consumer equilibrium. There is one common definition of consumer equilibrium which you all know, that is the consumer will be at consumer equilibrium when he or she gets the maximum satisfaction within the income and price restriction that is given to him or her. Okay, but over here we will use another definition which is particularly applicable to this case only. Okay, so let us see the definition. Consumer equilibrium means it will be in consumer equilibrium over here in this case when the slope of indifference curve is equal to the slope of budget line. Now we know that slope of budget line, which is always negative, okay, is given by minus px divided by py, that is the ratio of the two prices. Similarly, the slope of indifference curve is also given by MRS, that is marginal rate of substitution x for y. Okay, now the formula for MRS is change in y divided by change in x, that is the unit of commodity y that is to be sacrificed in order to consume one extra unit of x. Okay, since MRS is assumed to be diminishing, that is MRS is always negative, so what we can do for in case of consumer equilibrium in ordinal utility approach is that we can write the definition as this, that is MRS equals to px divided by py, that is we will negate or we will ignore the negative sign because both are negatives. Okay, now there are two conditions of equilibrium in the ordinal utility approach. First condition is MRS should be equal to the ratio of the prices, okay, where MRS is the slope of indifference curve and px divided by py is the slope of budget line. It means that when these two slopes are equal, okay, the value of these two slopes are equal, then we will conclude that the consumer will be in equilibrium. The second condition is that indifference curve should be convex to the origin at the point of intersection. Okay, we know that indifference curve is convex from its property itself, so this condition will always be there, and MRS equals to px by py. Now diagrammatically, usually when we talk about two slopes being equal, okay, two slopes will be equal at the point of tangency. Okay, at the point of tangency only the two slopes will be equal. Okay, now after defining the consumer equilibrium and mentioning the conditions, we now need a diagram to explain it. So I have already drawn the diagram over here where as you can see, okay, where you will represent good x along the horizontal axis and good y along the vertical axis. Okay, here I have taken three indifference curves. Let us note this higher indifference curve as IC3, second one as IC2, and third one as IC1. Okay, and this blue line which is a budget line, okay, let us define, write or note this as AB. Okay, and as you can see, there is only one point, that is point E over here, where the indifference curve and the budget line is intersecting at the point of tangency. Otherwise, this point, let's take it as D, sorry, and let's take this as H. These 2 points cannot be taken as tangency because here as we can see, budget line is crossing this indifference curve in more than one point, through more than one point. But over here in IC2's case, budget line is touching the indifference curve, second indifference curve, only at one point, that is at point E. Okay, so there is only one tangency. This IC3 is unattainable to the consumer because consumer does not have that much of income, and this IC1, if consumer consumes at IC1, then consumer will not get the maximum satisfaction. So consumer will get the maximum satisfaction at this level, okay, at the level of intersection of IC2 and the budget line. That is where the slope of budget line is equal to the, where the slope of budget line is equal to the slope of indifference curve. Now this is the explanation of equilibrium. But what will happen if there is unequilibrium, and how will consumer reach to the equilibrium level? Let us see that. Okay, here there may be two cases where consumer will not be in equilibrium. First is that when the slope of indifference curve is greater than the slope of budget line. That is where MRS is greater than PX divided by PY. So what will happen in this case? This case is represented by all the consumptions towards the left side of E. Okay, towards the left side of E, all this consumption level represents this case, first case, that is MRS greater than PX by PY. Let's say consumer is consuming over here, point a combination G. Okay, here we see that MRS XY is greater than PX by PY. The ratio of budget line PX divided by PY is less than the sacrifice rate that the consumer is willing to give. Okay, in this situation, what happens? In order to come back to equilibrium, the consumer will have to consume more of X. Okay, in this situation, the slope of indifference curve is greater than that of the budget line. So what will happen in this case? For the consumer to come back to the equilibrium level, the consumer will have to consume more of good X and less of good Y. As you can see, from point G to E, if the consumer will have to reach E, point E, or combination E from combination G, the consumer will have to increase the consumption of X. Okay, as you can easily see from here, let's say it was X1 earlier, then the consumer will have to consume X2. Okay, and in the process, the consumer will have to give up some units of Y. That is what we will conclude from this. For the consumer to come back to the equilibrium point, he will have to consume more of commodity X and less of commodity Y. On the other hand, when MRS is less than PX by PY, that is when the slope of budget line is greater than the slope of indifference curve, then what will happen? Over here, this is all the cases towards right hand side of, this case arises on the right hand side of E. Over here, always the slope of budget line is greater than the slope of indifference curve. Okay, all these points. Okay, let us take one example over here. Let's say this point is, let's say, point M. Okay, what happens in point M? Let's see. Here, as you can see, the consumer is not in equilibrium. Consumer will be in equilibrium at point E, or combination E. So what happens? For a consumer to reach from M to E, obviously the consumer will have to decrease the consumption of X. Okay, we'll have to decrease the consumption of X, and we'll have to decrease the consumption of X and increase the consumption of Y. As we move from M to E, the consumption of Y will increase. So this is what we will conclude over here. In this situation, the slope of indifference curve is greater than that of the budget line. For the consumer to come back to the equilibrium point, he will have to consume less of commodity X and more of commodity Y. This is how we concluded. So let us recall the things. Okay, first we have to define what consumer equilibrium is. Okay, what consumer equilibrium is. So over here, the definition of consumer equilibrium means where the consumer will be consuming that at that level where the slope of indifference curve will be equal to the slope of budget line. Okay, and whenever there is inequilibrium, okay, the consumer will reach back to the equilibrium level through this. Okay, when the slope of budget line is higher than the slope of when the slope of indifference curve is higher than the slope of budget line, the consumer will keep on increasing the consumption of X and reduce the consumption of Y. On the other hand, when consumer finds out that the slope of budget line is higher or more than the slope of indifference curve, then the consumer will keep on consuming more of commodity Y and less of commodity X. Hope you will remember this. Okay, for diagram you have to draw a diagram like this. Over here, let me erase few portion from this so that you will be able to make this diagram at home properly. Okay, I'm erasing. Sorry, I'm erasing the unnecessary notations from here. Let me IC3, IC2 and IC1. Your diagram should be like this. Okay, hope you all have understood the concept. Hope to see you soon and keep on studying. Whatever doubt you will have, please mention that in the comment box. Thank you very much.